Welcome back to Advertising Week 2018. I'm your host, Patrick McGinnis, and we are here at the WWE AW360 Live Stage. And I have an excellent guest here to talk about entrepreneurship, startups, and the New York ecosystem. It's Michael Loeb, founder of Loeb Enterprises. And I just want to introduce you to our guests here in case they don't know you. They may very well know you. You've done some pretty incredible things in your career. You built Synapse Group, which revolutionized the magazine subscription model that you sold to Time for a considerable amount of money. Then you helped Jay Walker build Priceline.com. You've worked on a bunch of other startups from healthcare to everywhere else, and now you're really focusing on startups. So what are you building now?
Well, what we are concentrating on is platform companies, right? And what I like about platform companies is that it's highly iterable and you can grow them very, very quickly. What we look for, Patrick, by the way, is from 35,000 feet, is this a giant problem that needs to be solved? And if you solve it, will you be rewarded for solving it? And we never want to build a solution looking for a problem. We always do if we did solve for this, could it be $1 billion company? Now, there's a lot of talk about unicorns, and I think we'll get to that later, but this is not a fictitious unicorn. This is actually a unicorn that, makes money and has revenue and is growing and is real, because in the end, I think that, VCs and everybody else and strategic buyers, they want value.
Right. And how do you find these ideas and substantiate that they are, in fact, the areas in which you want to spend your time, energy, and money?
Well, we have a large and very smart and very talented team, probably 300 people plus altogether, and they ideate a whole lot. So a lot of our ideas are organic. We do get ideas over the transom, and sometimes those have already been formed into companies, and sometimes it's a couple of threads that could be interesting. First step is always research. And if it checks out, then maybe we put a mini MVP into the marketplace, and if that checks out, then we'll tow into a larger MVP, and after a while, you get a real company.
And you have a presence here in New York City.
Yes, we do.
I know you're building companies in other markets as well, but you do have a pretty significant effort here in New York City. And New York has really stepped out of the shadows as a tech hub in the last 5-10 years. Does being in New York change the ideas that you have or affect the way that you build these companies?
I think it does, and I think that a lot has been written about the West Coast ecosystem. In fact, there was an Economist cover recently called Peak Valley, right? Saying that the valley has peaked. They talked about the exodus. They talked about that is prompted by the fact that housing prices in San Francisco are like 1.7x the rest of the country. Not that New York is cheap, but what's neat about New York, it's super concentrated, and you got so many smart people, so many smart young people who want to be here and live here and want to be part of the social fabric, the restaurants, the community, and unlike other cities, like in LA, which is very spread out, San Francisco is really very small and super concentrated, and I think, by the way, listens a little bit to itself. On the other hand, I'm very jealous of their ability to, form capital. But we're very content with New York. You have integrated in not only the talent and the ideas and media and so many industries and so many Fortune 500 companies, but you also have access to capital.
Right.
The hedge funds are here, the VCs are here, the PE firms are here. We happen to be in Midtown, and if you throw a stone in any direction, you're going to hit like about 14 bankers. So, or Donald Trump.
That's why you should throw stones.
Too. Right.
Okay.
Not if you live in a glass house.
That's true.
Yeah.
We love bankers. We love bankers.
Absolutely. Sometimes, right. When they have their checkbook out, we love it. Yeah.
So you mentioned unicorns.
Yep.
And I think we're kindred spirits in this. I think. I looked at the list recently of the number of unicorns there are across the globe, and I think it's above 300.
Right.
And you sort of start adding it up, doing the math, and looking at some of these business models, and it just feels like there's a lot of craziness happening. There's some real companies there, but there's a lot of froth.
Right.
Break it down for us. What's happening?
Well, first of all, there's not many advantages of being old, but one of them is I endured 2000, and I saw the meltdown there, and it was not pretty.
As did I.
Not pretty. Well, you were a baby at the time. Anyway, but it was not pretty. What we do know about, gravity is what goes up will come down, and this will come down, not quite with the same thud that it did in 2000, but it's going to come down. It's a little bit too frothy. Apropos to unicorns, last year about 160 were minted in the United States, plus or minus.
Wow.
I do a test with some gray hair entrepreneurs, the been there, done that crowd, and I asked them, cast your gaze into the future. How many of those, what percentage of those will end well? And I do get a range, but the low is 10% and the high is 20%. So think about that, right? These are billion-dollar valuation companies, and we have numbers up to 90% of them, right, are gonna melt to nothing, which is astonishing. So in the end, in good times and bad, what can you count on? You can count on, are you making revenues? Are you making progress? Profits? Do you have a purpose, right? In other words, are you solving a big problem that a lot of people want to buy your product or services, to prevent or ameliorate?
Why do you think smart? I mean, people who invest in these companies they're not stupid, but you see large institutions, respected organizations. I'm not going to name names here because,
because you want a job tomorrow.
Exactly, but
right.
Why are they investing at these crazy valuations?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think what you have to do is you got to unpack how venture capital works, right? So in venture, you have a fund, and when you have a fund, venture from an asset class is the most. Hey man, how are you? From an asset class, thanks a lot. From an asset class,
live adulation.
Right. That was from Central Casting, but I appreciate it anyway. But so as an asset class, it is the most illiquid, right? It is the highest returning, highest risk. But the way it operates, if you kind of commit a certain amount, $1 million to a fund, you have a drawdown depending on the assets that they find, right? So you will get a capital call when they find something, and then you have 2 weeks to get the money out and get it to the venture firm. But when you think about it, if that is the requirement, right, that I got to get it to you in 2 weeks, you got to put it in an asset class that is the opposite of venture.
Yeah. Because
it's got to be very sure, and it's got to be very liquid. And so by definition, it's going to be 1 or 2% returning versus 15% returning over here. So what happens is the bankers have a tremendous amount of pressure to put that money to work fast. And it does, by the way, warp their thinking, and all of a sudden they find deals that are not great deals, but they find that they got to put the money to work. Or their investors are going to complain about, I've got all this money on the sideline.
Yeah,
it's sitting in the wrong asset class. Right? And I want to move it to the right asset class. So it is an artificial pressure, but nonetheless, it's pressure of the ecosystem.
Okay, final question. So you're skeptical about the unicorns. You just gave us 10 or 20%. How do you build a portfolio that is resilient if things slow down, if we have that pullback that you've been talking about?
Yeah. So it's very interesting when you get these meltdowns. There is a kernel of truth to all of them. Well, maybe not Southeast sea pearls or tulip bulbs, but there was one. The railroad industry over 100 years ago had the same thing, bid up too much, and then melted down. In Gen 1 Internet, 2000, same thing, right? But they weren't wrong. They were just overpriced.
Right.
So we're going to find a repricing. Smart money, by the way, waits for those repricings and are very opportunistic about those things, and we're going to see that again. And I think what you do, this is why I default to value, right? Because come rain or shine, if it's a good value, in hard times, it'll survive, it'll endure, and it'll come out the other side actually stronger because the detritus of all the other companies, it'll pick up those clients, pick up that tech, pick up those opportunities, and so that's what you look for.
All right, lots to think about. Michael Loeb, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.